Session 4 is going to be on negotiating great contracts, and I got to tell you, this is probably the most fun right here of all of it. I've done a lot of surveys with very successful agents throughout the state of Florida, and one of the things that I've determined from all of them that are successful is that they spend 80% of their time prospecting and marketing, and the other 20% at the office doing other types of work. So I guess what they'll say, you got to circulate to percolate, is true. You got to get out and you got to knock on some doors. One of the first things that we have to do is qualify buyers. There are a number of things that we have to go through to make that qualification. You know, you can ask them how long have they been looking. There's got to be some reason why they're buying. As far as selling skills are concerned, focusing on buyers, just remember that anytime that we're trying to sell something in negotiations, one of the things that I've learned early in my career in negotiating is that it's got to be a win-win kind of, or a lose-lose, but I'll give you if you give me. Parties have to be willing to compromise. And if the parties aren't willing to compromise, guess what? You're going to have a difficult task selling anything. And some of the skills involved in selling real estate, I always suggest that people develop some type of script. A script will keep you on track, and it can either be a laptop computer to use or a book or something. They're important. When you're dealing with buyers, you have to attach benefits. A benefit might be equity built up in a property. It could be any number of things that's going to benefit them. But I've got to tell you, the benefits are not the hot button. We also have to overcome certain reluctant buyers. Some buyers are just reluctant, and what we have to say is that if I've got a buyer who's a little resistant, they may have an objection. Well, what you're going to have to do is remember that your customer is always right. You have to agree with them. So the first thing that you do is you agree with whatever that objection is. The next thing you have to ask is this the only objection that you have? You want to shake it out to make sure that there's nothing else out there that you have to deal with. Once you've cleared that, then what you have to do is that you've got to answer that question. You've got to answer that objection. In other words, you've got to solve that problem. And so you've got to agree with them. You've got to ask the question. And then what you have to do is answer. You've got to go in there and you've got to fix the problem. Some of the other things that we have to deal with, and what I believe is probably the most important part about negotiating, is motive. Now, let me say this. Motive is the hot button. And there can be all kinds of other reasons why people buy, but I have listed in here 4. Personal space, prestige, but here's the big one, security. I can tell you the world that we live in today, especially families with children, security is the #1 reason they want to make sure that that house they're buying is in a secure area and their family will be secure. As far as the process of selling is concerned, you're converting leads into contracts is what you're trying to do. You're evaluating that buyer. What we're trying to do is overcome negative responses. We're trying to overcome those negative questions that they may give us. I think the most important thing is that in dealing with buyers, build rapport. If you have a bond, if you have a connection with them, they're going to feel more comfortable with you and easier to deal with. As far as closing, let me say this about closing. All closing is a decision-making process, and this takes place all the time. One of the big reasons that buyers cannot make a decision or will not make a decision is fear. They're afraid of something, and what you have to do is figure out what that fear is. Fear of commitment, fear of not knowing enough, fear of making the wrong decision, fear of change. What is that fear? What are they afraid of? And once you can identify that, it should be smooth sailing from that point forward. Now, there is a psychology to selling, and I think one of the important things that we have to do is convert negative words to positive words. Let me give you some examples. Instead of using the word cost, use the word investment. Instead of using the word contract, use the word agreement. And the one that I got to tell you is my pet peeve, the word deal. I don't like that word. It sounds bad. Instead of using the word deal, use the word opportunity, because that's exactly what it is. It's an opportunity. As far as closing techniques are concerned, I'm going to give you a number of closing techniques that I think works extremely well. The alternate of choice is a great way of approaching when you're trying to get an appointment. Is 2 o'clock going to be okay, or would 6 o'clock be better? You don't give them a yes or no, because if you say, can we meet? And they say no, where are you? You're out. So what you want to do is give them an alternate of choice. It's at this time or this time. An active question is also a great question. In fact, I love this question because this tests the water. This will tell you where they are. If you're showing a house and they're looking around and you happen to hear them say that one of the rooms is going to be used for, let's say, a sewing room or for an exercise room, one of the questions that you might want to ask, you might say, of the bedrooms or the rooms that we see here, which one do you think would be best suited for your sewing room? If they respond by saying that this room over here may be, what they're telling you is that they are emotionally moving into that house. And by the way, that's a good sign. If they say, we don't know, that means that at that point, they can't see themselves moving into that house. And let me say this, it's important for you to know that a buyer cannot take physical possession of a home until they first take psychological possession. And what I'm saying is that if they can't see themselves moving in, they will never make the offer to purchase. So you've got to help them see themselves moving in. And I've always said that if you're with a buyer and they've been looking at the house for, let's say, 10 or 15 minutes and they've made no comment, chances are they're not interested. One of the keys that I always look at, if a buyer says, you know what, that carpet is too dark, what that tells me is that there's an interest, but there's something that's blocking them. It's the carpet. And you've got to overcome that objection. As far as procuring calls is concerned, procuring calls simply to me means that person that creates the desire to purchase. It's not necessarily the first or second person that shows it. It's the person that creates that desire. And let me say this from a practical standpoint, if you show a property to a buyer and all of a sudden they end up with another agent later on and another agent shows them that same house, that second agent is probably going to be considered procuring calls, because there's no way that you can prove that you were the reason why they bought. But what I do know is that if you show a property and then another agent simply writes the offer on it without showing it, in most of the procuring call situations, the broker that actually showed it is going to be procuring calls, and that agent that did not show it will not be. So procuring calls will be easy to be able to assess. Also, as far as Article 3 of the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, says that we're supposed to cooperate with each other. Now, that does not mean paying commissions. That simply means sharing information. But more importantly, Article 17 says that if real estate brokers are disputing over a commission, that they're willing to go to arbitration over it. In other words, every board or association of realtors has an arbitration committee that will oversee this process. And that panel looks at a number of things, the conduct of the brokers, the role and relationship of the parties. One of the big things is the continuity. In other words, are there any breaks? But I think at the end result, the question is, prove to me that you created that desire to purchase. And if you can show me that you did and that other person didn't, then you're going to be the procuring cause. And I think that's all I have for this particular section on negotiating contracts. So what I'd like to do right now is to go ahead and review with you that information that's going to be important for you. Successful agents spend 80% of their time prospecting and marketing. Benefits include pride of ownership, equity buildup, tax benefits, and location. To overcome a reluctant buyer, you should agree, ask, then answer. The buyer's motivation includes personal space, prestige, and security. To overcome negative attitudes in buyers, first develop rapport. Fear is the number one obstacle to overcome with a buyer. You should convert negative words into positive words, such as contracts into agreements and cost into investment. An active question allows agents to assess buyers and their moving in process. Article 3 of the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics requires realtors to cooperate. Article 17 requires realtors to arbitrate. Procuring calls is a process of determining who is entitled to a commission. And that's all I have for that section of this book.